Good morning, TNT, and welcome back to PSA TV. This is the Wake Up Call segment. I'm Avalon Williams. In studio with us this morning, he is an attorney at law and also he's a farmer's advocate, Mr. Richard Jaggasar. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Avalon, and thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you for coming.
I often say the PSA is my neighbor in my fight for human rights and equal and fair treatment and so on. So I would like to say good morning, neighbor. Thank
you so much. I mean, it's been a while since I haven't seen you, Richard. I know you have been representing the Central Farmers Association. You can just give us an update on what's happening.
Okay, so the Central Farmers Association, we have a number of fights going on. Not all are necessarily legal fights. Our job is to stay away from the legal fight as much as possible.
Right.
So right now, we are trying by all reasonable means necessary to deal with this particular issue by not going to court. And that issue is the opening of the Woodford Lodge facility in Jaggasar. Now that facility has a big sign on the eastern side of it, NAMDEFCO's Central Farmers Wholesale Market. Now, that being said, even though it says wholesale market, it goes without saying that facilities such as the Makoya market and the Debe Pina market, that's at NAMDEFCO's head office, those markets operate at retail and wholesale in some cases interchangeably. So even though the title says wholesale, all we're concerned about is that it opens as a farmer's market.
Right.
And our second request is that when it opens, not if, but when it opens, the central farmers be given first preference for plots.
But Richard, also, why is the facility closed up? Because I know it was commissioned under the previous government.
Yes.
And
it was
it's
commissioned,
just closed.
it was completed. We have gotten in touch with MP for Shagwanazis Faisal Kare. Although he wasn't the line minister, he was heavily involved in the commissioning of the project. We've gotten in touch with the MP who the facility does fall in her area, that's Ramona Ramdial, and of course Jaggasar. And these three MPs are all saying the facility was commissioned, approved by OSHA, and opened. It was simply for NAMDEFCO to put together the policy arrangement. How is it going to run? Is it going to operate 4 to 7? Is it going to operate Saturday mornings? In other words, it was the policy and the administrative aspect left outstanding. And these MPs are saying it was commissioned, it was completed. What is the problem? And this is since 2015, 16, 17, we are 4 years in, 4 years later, and there is no facility, there is no place for the central farmers. And what is most disheartening is the fact that they are in fact operating a facility, and that facility is operating on a temporary basis at the car park of the Ministry of Agriculture's new head office in Jaggasar, just off the highway.
Right.
And there is a cost to operate that temporary facility. There's a cost to hire workers. There's a cost to put up tents, to take down tents. In fact, it disrupts the workers on a Friday afternoon because the tents go up from Friday afternoon to prepare for Saturday. So in other words, instead of utilizing an existing facility, a stone throw away, just across the highway, instead of utilizing an existing facility, they have instead taking monies out of the public purse to operate this temporary market, which serves no real purpose or no purpose that this farmers market cannot do it itself.
I know you're an attorney and you're representing all these farmers too. And in terms of what's happening with, with the facilities and stuff, how are these farmers? Are these farmers paying you for representing them?
Oh, certainly not. Certainly not. What happened is as you know, I've always been involved in NGOs and other community activities. I am from a household where my both parents were teachers. They were involved in tutor and so on. So I like to get involved in community activities and so on. And one day, a few of the farmers were putting together a meeting. They asked to use my home as a meeting venue. I said, sure, no problem, and so on. And that is how I got involved in it. And it is all for the benefit of the community. So in that sense, that is the fee. The fee is the because I see the fact that if these farmers benefit, then we have homegrown food being sold at a lower cost rather than what is being sold imported in the groceries. That is money I am saving. That is the farmers selling food, money staying in Trinidad's pocket, being purchased by persons who work in Trinidad. And therefore, the economy in Central, the economy in Trinidad as a result grows, and that is the kind of country I want my children to grow up in.
Yeah.
So in that sense, that is what I see, and that is why I'm doing it.
What I also heard that there's some sort of trust issue with the NAMDEFCO What's happening there?
So the situation is simple. We have been in negotiations with NAMDEFCO for some time now.
Yeah.
As recently as the end of June, I believe June 26th to June 28th, we met with NAMDEFCO officials, and what we did is we handed over a list of 200 farmers. We provided for them the list of the farmers, the location of their farms, their home address, contact number, and most importantly, the acreage of their crops and what they are actively cultivating. In other words, we did half of NAMDEFCO's job for them, if not more.
Yeah.
And we are telling them, listen, these are a list of farmers who, if you were to conduct a feasibility study, these are the farmers who are interested in plots. These are the farmers who actively are reaping and do not have a place to vend. These are, if you drive to Felicity, you drive to Korea Village, you drive to Monroe Road, these are the people who are throwing up sheds, who are throwing up tents and selling on the side of the road. In other words, these are the people NAMDEFCO ought to be serving. These are the people who want to, these are the people who are vending and want to vend in a proper and secure environment. So in other words, and mind you, NAMDEFCO has a statutory responsibility to provide farmers market. That is in NAMDEFCO's Act. And these farmers, as a result of that, have a legitimate expectation. They have a legitimate expectation that NAMDEFCO would see through their obligation to farmers in this country and provide for them a place to vend.
I know you all also had a protest. And you,
on Saturday, yes.
Right. How did all of that play out?
What is important to note in the protest was there were representatives from all different areas in Central. There were the Korea Village farmers, Petersfield, Pear Road, Charlieville farmers, even some representatives of Fisherman Association, Felicity farmers, and so on. And these are the people that the Central Farmers Association represent, farmers in the entire catchment. As you know, Central Trinidad was the base, the sugar belt for Caroni Limited. And when Caroni Limited closed down, the farmers, or the former Caroni Limited workers, received agricultural plots and so on. And they, as a result of that, became farmers. And these are the people who inevitably have now seen the Woodford Lodge facility and are simply asking for it to be open. Right. So these are the people who came out to the protest. The former Caroni Limited workers turned farmer, who are interested in becoming vendors, and these are the people who came to the protest. Not only that, there were even a few individuals who are residents in the area. So there are persons who live near to the farmers market. This is near Ramsey-Rand Road, just behind the Sugar Owners Magistrate Squad. Factory Road, Ramsey-Rand Road Junction. There are persons who are resident there who are coming out and saying, listen, open the facility. So that tells us two things. That tells us, firstly, that NAMDEFCO and the ministry, they cannot use traffic and residential issues as a problem because the residents want the market open. It also tells us that the persons who live nearby see the benefit of a farmer's market being open and stone's throw away. It comes back to the point where it saves money, it saves time, it saves resources, because at the end of the day, there is a perfectly operationalized facility sitting, waiting, commissioned and completed by last administration, and simply needs to be opened.
So if the facility is not open, though, what is the next step for the farmers?
Next step is that we go to court. As the new law term open, we go to the court, we ask what is going on, why it hasn't been open, and if the explanation is not reasonable, we sue for the market to be open.
Do you represent other farmers as well, besides the Central?
Yes, certainly. So I represent farmers on a national scale. Right. We have meetings all over the country and so on. Recently, I met with some farmers from DB Penal. This was shortly after the individual was murdered. So we met with some farmers there. We met with some farmers in Orange Valley, and essentially, what my role is I simply ask, what do you need? Right. And why do you need it? So say, for example, the Fisherman Association, after the boat was overturned and so on. Recently, as of just yesterday, I met with them. What do you need and why? And the answer was simple. They need 24/7 security and lights. So the solution is, again, quite simple. Let's write to TNTech, let's write to the Ministry of National Security, and let's find out what's the problem. If it's a simple situation of funding or resources, we can raise funds and we can put some of the costs. And that is simply my role. My role is simply to get to understand the problems in the areas, the farmers on a national scale, or citizens in general, understand the problem, and then offer them active solutions that meet their needs on a realistic basis.
It's just a lot going on, and it seems to be falling on deaf ears. So, Richard, I just want to switch to another topic with you. I know you're an attorney.
Yes.
I just want to ask you, I mean, it's a topic that's trending right now with my boss, Mr. Watson Duke. What is your thoughts on this Sedition Act?
Okay, so for me, as an attorney and as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, and I want to stress that as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, it boils down to our inalienable rights provided in the Constitution. It boils down to whether or not we truly have freedom of expression, freedom to express our opinions, and so on. So in a span of 3 days or 4 days, as the case may be, we saw two things happening. We saw one, your boss, Watson Duke, was held and charged in sedition laws. Now, the Sedition Act is a relatively old act, but more so than its age, is its application, its object and purpose, its reason for being. The reason it came about was to silence groups that speak out against wrongdoing in the country. And if you look at the water riots and so on, the Rent Payers Association and so on, their argument then is the same as now. They needed, in their case, they needed representative legislation for the sole purpose of overthrowing the crown. We need to have a democratic society and so on. And the argument was simple. If you do not allow us to speak through our representatives, then we are not democratic. That same argument stands today. If you do not allow us to speak to our representative, in this case the PSA members, their representative was Watson Duke, then we are silenced, our constitutional rights are infringed, and so on. So in that sense, the sedition law is outdated. What also happened, I said two things happened in Trinidad. The second thing that happened is the situation with Carlton Denny. Now, what he said on the platform, or why he said it, whether it's true or not, I leave that for other people to deal with. That is not what I will address. The manner in which he treated with it as well, the press conference on, again, I leave that for other folks. What I find disheartening is the fact that after a gentleman, any citizen of this country, mounted a political platform, in other words, he utilized his constitutional right to be politically affiliated. He mounted a political platform, and in less than 24 hours, documents from his personal HR file was released. Statements regarding his character were made by a minister and another government official. And I find for things like that to happen, we find ourselves in a situation, we find ourselves in a country where there may be a man on the street right now who wants to mount a political platform. It could be any political platform, and is fearful that his private information will be leaked as a result. And again, we are seeing our constitutional rights being infringed, or we are seeing the potential for that to happen. And I have called upon the powers that be. I've called upon the Attorney General's office and so on to answer these queries, and the Commissioner of Police have sent letters to them and asking, please set the citizens' minds at ease. Now understand me clearly. I'm not asking for charges to be laid on anybody. I'm simply saying, as the government official, as the power that be, please put the citizens' mind at ease. Can we go to a political meeting now? Can we raise issues now? That is the question. And if the answer is no, we have a serious problem.
Mr. Duke was charged, and do you even recall any other person that holds such, title as Mr. Duke having said some sort of seditious act during your tenure as an attorney?
There are other individuals. For example, another individual is charged under the Sedition Act, right? Or well, not charged. A search warrant was issued under the protection of the Sedition Act. That is an official from a large religious organization. And one of the things somebody mentioned to me in a meeting recently is that, listen, first they come for religious leaders, then they come for the trade unionists, then they come for the journalists, and before you know it, there are tanks rolling in the street and your democratic right is infringed.
It's a lot. It is. I mean, it's a very sad situation though, because as an attorney as well, Richard, is it right for, as Mr. Duke said during his press conference yesterday, in the way how they handled the situation with him, where they intercept the vehicle and the first thing they asked for was his cell phone, but he weren't charged yet. What is the procedures in that though? Should officers ask for your belongings before you're charged, or?
Well, I mainly practice as a criminal defense attorney.
Right.
And what I must say is the officers in Trinidad and Tobago, they need to be trained in how to execute stop and search warrants.
Right.
I believe it was less than a year ago, there was a video on Facebook where officers refused to show the resident of a house the search warrant, and that circulated and so on social media. And that is a regular, well, at least my clients instruct me, that's a regular occurrence.
Right.
The manner in which they executed is often allegations of abuse of process. In other words, they stop the car, there's one person in the car, but yet 3 or 4 vehicles of officers filled with officers. So 15 to 18 officers jump out, guns pointed, lay on the ground, face on the ground, and they empty a pocket, they search your car, and so on. In those circumstances, the person eventually charged, and I'll get back to that, the person eventually charged does not have sight of his vehicle. He doesn't know where they found whatever, or allegedly found whatever. And what I wanted to get back to is the person eventually charged. Look at the situation of Marlene McDonald. Look at the situation of Watson Duke. For some reason in this country, you are held on allegations of charges longer than it takes you to get a court date. That cannot be so. Listen, we need legislation, much like the US, much like the UK, which simply says you can be held up to 48 hours on charges of this nature, summary offenses. You can be held up to 72 hours of charges of this nature, terrorism and so on. And you can be held up to 7 days of charges of a particular murder or allegations of murder and so on. And the prima facie test, the first instance test, must be so high that the officer conducting the investigation, the officer in charge, the superintendent or the inspector, as the case may be, must have to answer to somebody. And it cannot be that all of them, all 1,200 officers in this country, answer to the commissioner of police. No, there's a ranking system. Somebody needs to answer to one step higher up the ladder. In other words, if the charge took longer than expected to be laid, that person has to answer to the person higher than him why it took so long. And if the case is that person must be removed from the case, that person's incompetence has now been shown that the case cannot be proceeded, that must happen. And I'll give you a little hint in the legal fraternity here. That saves the state cost, you know. Because when the commissioner realizes that a particular officer cannot handle a case because of its legal fortitude and so on, what does the state do? The state hires an external attorney through by means of fiat, which is a fancy Latin term to simply mean they subcontract the work outside, and they have to pay that external attorney from the public purse. So in other words, training these officers saves the public purse. In other words, training these officers in how to lay the charge, how quick to lay the charge, what kind of charge, how to word the charge, etc. By doing that, it saves time, it saves money, and it prevents external attorneys from exorbitant costs and so on.
I'm just watching the headline here where Kamala is also opposition leader Kamala Bissassa said, why not Hines too?
Yes.
I mean, there's a petition going around on social media. Have you came across that? Have you signed?
Yes. You see, the situation is that we have to remember that Kamala Bissassa is the leader of the opposition.
Yeah.
So she has a particular role to play in society, much like you, much like Watson, much like myself. We have particular roles to play in society. So whereas she is calling for Hines for charges to be laid, I am not. In my opinion, Hines to me is one of the examples of an outdated politician. In fact, he may not even be able to walk in his own constituency. And insofar as that is concerned, maybe he may have made statements to try and save his political career as the case may be. Who knows? It is my view that that brand of politics no longer exists in Trinidad and Tobago with free and fair thinking individuals like ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say it's sort of a political move that took place with Mr. Watson Duke.
Yes.
You know, coming up to the eve of elections and stuff like that. What would you say?
I was making the point with my father quite recently that long gone are the days when you can march in these streets. Long gone are the days of Lionel Sukran and Bastio Pandey and Ramesh Lawrence Mirage, where they can fight for proper human rights, fair treatment, and so on. And if they hold you, well, so be it. If they arrest you, well, so be it. Long gone are those days. Right now, what we're looking for are politicians or potential candidates of MPs, of senators, and so on, who have clean records and are of good character and have never been defamed and so on. And that is the situation we live in today. Personally, My opinion is, if you see something wrong, you speak out. If you of a particular opinion, you speak out, you say what you have to say, and where the chips fall, let them fall.
Oh my gosh, and me as a journalist, I'm also scared of what I say. So I have to be very cautious here. You know, Richard, I just want to thank you so much. I know we're pressed on time. We have a lot of people to interview this morning. I also have a little breaking news here. It came from the General Secretary for NATUC, Mr. Michael, and he said that Mr. Douglas Mendez and Mr. Alfonso and Rishi Das have agreed to work with NATUC to challenge the Sedition Act. So they're going to have a press conference on Sunday at 1:30 p.m. at the PSA rooftop here at Abercrombie Street. So, yeah.
I will be tuned in.
Those
are excellent guys.
Yeah. Have you worked with them before?
Yes, indeed, some of them. In my very limited and junior capacity, but working with gentlemen of that rank, all you have to do is soak in as much knowledge as possible.
I know. But you know, with the farmers and stuff, the situation that's happening there, I really hope that, you know, something positive comes out of it. I do look forward to hearing more info from you to get more stories as well. So I'll just ask you for a closing comment here as we have to toss the news, so you can end with your closing comment.
Simply put, our position is simple. There is a Shoguna's market that operates Monday to Saturday. There is a ministry market that operates on Saturday mornings. That market, that ministry market, 72 to 75% of the vendors there are outside of Central, therefore Central farmers need servicing. There is a facility. It's not to say we're asking for 13 million to build. It has already been built. It's not to say we're asking for an exorbitant. Tell us the problem, and if we can fix it, we can fix it. And that is simply the position. Open the market and let the vendors handle their business. And of course, that will bring in revenue and so on, because they have to pay some nominal funds, so that brings in revenue.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for coming on the program here this morning. We were joined by attorney at law here, Mr. Richard Jaggasar. So we're going to toss the news, and also coming up on a phone call with us from overseas is Mr. Samuel Stafford. He'll be joining in here at PSA TV shortly. Let's take a break.